Good morning, everyone. We are picking up with some more headlines. Primarily the impetus, the springboard are some cases in Israel. Today's class on taxing plasticware and sugary drinks. Good idea, Halakhah or culture war. Is actually, we'll also have a little bit of a Tu B'Shvat theme. We're in the Isruchag of Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is one of those holidays which is easily overlooked. So, in case anyone missed it yesterday, we'll talk about it today. And this the subject has to do with some of the idea of how to encourage proper behavior or healthy habits, and what the role of government or authorities may be in trying to disincentivize some of the negative, unhealthful behavior. And it relates in particular to the story that emerged out of Israel. We'll look at a good summary of the subject in source number 1. In Israel, disposable plastics trigger culture war, test PM. And this is a piece from the Associated Press just last week. On Idit Silman's first day as Israel's new environmental protection minister, she handed out soft drinks in disposable plastic cups to hospital patients. The gesture held deep symbolic meaning in Israel, where soft drinks and single-use cups, plates, and cutlery have become weapons in a culture war between the country's secular Jewish majority and the smaller but politically powerful religious minority. For much of the public, a tax imposed last year on plastic goods seemed like a straightforward way to cut down on the use of items that are major sources of pollution. Right? It would seem to be a very helpful environmental policy. And we've spoken about environmentalism in the past. Okay, article continues, but many ultra-Orthodox Jews saw the extra cost as an assault on a way of life that relies on the convenience of disposable goods to ease the challenges of managing their large families. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, the most right-wing in Israel's history, relies heavily on ultra-Orthodox parties and has moved quickly to remove the tax on plastics. On Sunday, his cabinet voted to repeal the tax, sending the matter to the full parliament, what is expected to be final approval. We promised and we delivered, said Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, head of the Religious Zionism Party. The fight against the cost of living is a fight we are all waging. So you see that he sees this in terms of a financial cost of living issue. United Nations Environment Program is called plastic waste, one of the biggest environmental scourges of our time. And says the equivalent of a garbage truck full is dumped into the ocean each minute. Gross. Plastics can take centuries to degrade, cause extensive damage to ecosystems that contain compound toxics to organisms. Nonetheless, Netanyahu's ultra-Orthodox allies or Haredim are celebrating the plastic tax as expected repeal. Disposable plasticware has become a key element of the Haredi lifestyle in recent decades, said Yisrael Cohen, an ultra-Orthodox political analyst. Families with an average of 6 children per household use disposable plasticware for weekday meals and large Sabbath gatherings alike, as a labor-saving solution to washing the dishes. Single-use plasticware is de rigueur in Jewish seminaries, where ultra-Orthodox men study and eat their meals. It's an entire industry, an institution, he said. Single-use plastic is a great solution for the Haredi community. For ultra-Orthodox politicians, these taxes were emblematic of what they considered the previous government's attack on their lifestyle. Haredi media outlets freely referred to them as decrees issued by the secular finance minister at the time of Avigdor Lieberman that were aimed at targeting the religious minority. Environmental groups say that over the course of 2022, the year the tax was in effect, single-use plastic consumption dropped by 1/3. A survey of Israeli beaches by a pair of environmental groups, Zalul and the Israel Union for Environmental Defense, found a significant drop in the quantity of single-use plasticware and plastic bottles on Israeli beaches. They cited the tax on plastic and sweetened drinks. You don't have, people aren't buying as many bottles to leave behind. Silman, who was a member of Bennett's party before defecting to Netanyahu's Likud party last year, signaled on Sunday that she may yet change her stance. Silman voted against the cabinet decision to repeal the plastics tax, saying that after studying the issue in recent weeks, she has come to understand the enormous environmental cost of disposable plastics. She said the government should find an alternative way to reduce plastic consumption before doing away with the tax, but she said the original tax was a mistake and should not have been done in a way that arouses antagonism towards a particular population. Just a side commentary. We see a lot going on in Israel now, a lot of disagreement about judicial reforms. Might be a good idea to do those also in a way that doesn't arouse antagonism towards within a population. but we'll stop with the commentary on that issue now, just return to the subject at hand. So there was a tax against plastic, reusable, single-use plastic items and sugary drinks. This article mostly focuses on the environmental issue at hand. It seems that it actually worked, in 1 year of at least some study, and at least anecdotally it worked. New government came in, became a political issue, and they're going to remove this terrible decree against a segment of the population. But you see, even Silman, the environmental minister, goes from handing out sugary drinks in plastic cups to recognizing it's more complicated. So we have an environmental issue, we have a health issue, it's a political issue. Reactions to the article before we tackle some of the Jewish sources that can help inform on the subject.
Rabbi, I've heard people comment about it, how they feel like so anti-Haredi, that these young couples who have 8 children or more, it's just they cannot manage, and they really feel that it's against them. Right.
Well, look, I think that is true. There is definitely the burden for when you eliminate the convenience of some of these items, or you make it harder to afford these items. It's a tax issue, right? They're not saying you can't use them; they're just saying you have to pay more for them. But if you're paying, if you're buying them in bulk, there's those who use them more. The response would be, let's all try to find more environmental solutions.
Yeah, again, I think that if you're so frum, you should care.
Correct. There's the issue, there's what they did, there's the politics. So the politics is that the tax is anti-Haredi. The response is the tax is environmentally conscious. The question is there some sort of middle ground? These days in politics, often not. I think that Silman here recognizes the complexity of the issue. She voted against repealing the tax. Now, look, there is a larger, cost of life issue. The high cost of living that Smotrich talks about is there in all sorts of issues. There's some article out today about something that Smotrich wrote inviting Costco into Israel. They were talking about it because he seemed to use a Google Translate to translate his statement on the subject, which really didn't do a very good job. It's like last night, Nama showed me an ice cream store in Israel that had Snickers flavored ice cream. And in Hebrew, it said Snickers, Samach Nun Yud Kuf Resh. And in English, it said Sneakers. It was spelled S-N-E-A-K-E-R-S. Sometimes lost in translation. But the gist was the fact that in Israel today, there are a couple of supermarket chains that essentially control most of the business when it comes to food shopping. And that leads to inflationary pressure. That's not going to bring costs down when you have less competition. So there was bring Costco in. Now there's a whole other there are other issues that would impede Costco. It just happens to be in Israel today, various tariffs and the like on certain products might make the whole discount shopping experience for a foreign company untenable. But the cost of living is a big issue, and that's how it always is. Look, the convenience that we have, if it wasn't so convenient, if it wasn't affordable, a lot of things would change with regards to the environment. The more convenient it is, the bigger the problem. The more expensive it is, maybe the less the problem. But trying to find that sweet spot. How do you, in very, I guess, stark, simplistic terms, how do you defend the fact that you're destroying the earth by saying it's religious persecution? It plays out well, but trying to find the middle ground is interesting.
You're bringing 8 children onto the earth. Don't you want an earth there for them?
Yeah, again, that's
and maybe, I mean,
Hashem Yazor, God will help.
God will help them,
answer.
right? Exactly, but maybe we have to help God too.
Ah,
God
okay,
helps those who help themselves, right?
so we have the environmental issue, and then tackling on the sugary tax on sugary drink issue, which is something that we've seen attempted in different places in America, right? That was a very big deal for in New York City, to institute those taxes. What was the response to that when that was attempted? It was an attack against minority communities because you're making them pay for it, but making them pay more, they can't afford it. But that also contributes to health issues. So it's kind of, again, a vicious cycle that doesn't only have to involve Haredim versus Chilonim, or the religious versus the secular. So we'll take a look at some of the environmental issues or sources and responses, and then tackle the sugary drink issue, which doesn't seem to get as much play, but it is connected, because if the sugary drinks are in disposable bottles and those cost more, then that's the idea is that also helps on the environmental side as well. So when it comes to the environment, there's some broad categories of sources. Some sources would basically say there's a mitzvah to be environmentally conscious. There's a mitzvah to preserve the earth. Very famous statement in the Midrash, source number 2. Look at God's work, for who can straighten what he has twisted? When the Blessed Holy One created the first human, he took him and led him around all the trees of the Garden of Eden and said to him, look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. All that I have created, it was for you that I created it. Pay attention that you do not corrupt and destroy my world. If you corrupt it, there is no one to repair it after you. Right, and even the Torah's text itself, we were given, right? Adam was given the garden, la'avda u'lishamra, to work it and to protect it. There is this idea of having an environmental consciousness that's built in to humanity's mission on Earth, and there is a mitzvah not to destroy things. That's the mitzvah, or the prohibition against bal tashchit. You're not allowed to destroy things for no reason. Source number 3, the root of this commandment is well known. It is in order to teach our souls to love good and benefit and to cling to it. And this is the way of the pious, as people of proper action. They love peace and are happy for the good of the creatures and bring them close to Torah. They do not destroy even a grain of mustard in the world. And they're distressed by all loss and destruction that they see. And if they can prevent it, they will prevent any destruction with all of their strength. So there's a responsibility to be careful and not to destroy. At the same time, we have an opportunity and permission to use what we need, and finding that happy balance is the challenge. But from a purely, I would say, is Judaism an environmentally friendly religion? Yes. Is there a religious imperative to properly not wantonly use more than you need, or to recycle if there's an effective way of doing so, and even taking the lesser of the evils. If they say that the worst thing to use is styrofoam, so don't use styrofoam, use something else, right? The answer would be that religiously there is this responsibility. Is it an absolute obligation that comes at the expense of convenience or benefit or enjoyment? Not necessarily, but it's clearly, we lean towards being environmentally friendly and doing what we can for the environment. And in fact, there was an interesting article that mentions a Haredi journalist. Source number 4. Haredim are Israel's true environmentalists. Blasting Finance Minister Avigdor Lieberman's anti-Haredi plan to tax disposable plastic utensils. This is when they were instituting the tax back in 2021. Haaretz journalist Chaim Levinson insisted that Haredim are far greener than Israel's general society. If you think about it, the Haredim were actually the real green society, he wrote, noting their rock-bottom use of private cars, handing down clothes to younger siblings, avoidance of expensive and unnecessary products, minimum overseas vacations, small and crowded homes, pollution-free Shabbos and Yom Tov, parsimony in electricity consumption, right? How comfortable it is to feel green when the person who pays the tax, the Haredi woman, is already weakened. The classic hegemonic move of control, that others pay the social price, so you feel much better about yourself, Levinson concluded. All right, so he says, what do you do? You're taxing them. They're the ones who, if they would use proportionally their share of the resources, you have a bigger environmental problem. And so you have to look at it in its totality, and find that where they may use too much plastic, but they don't use as much electricity, or they or other aspects of the fact that they don't drive as many cars proportionally and the like. So it's an interesting observation. Again, there still is this view of this as a confrontation between, religious and secular. But if we dig a little bit more deeply, maybe we can analyze the fact that the Haredi community is pulling its fair share when it comes to its environmental consciousness. And then we come to something that we saw a couple of years ago when we talked about Jewish environmentalism. Right? Why isn't climate change a bigger issue for the Orthodox? Right? The environment is, we see God created the world for us to protect it. So why does it seem to be so hard for the Orthodox community to be as environmentally proactive as other parts of the Jewish community? And if you look at the different, there are Orthodox Jews involved in environmental movements or initiatives, but for the most part, we stay away. We're not as actively involved, and we make our accommodations. And as the first article, as the AP noted, in our communities, we have all shuls have kiddush. How many shuls have kiddush that they use real dishes? I haven't found it yet. I know that in plenty of yeshivas they do use dishes and they have dishwashers, right? They'll often talk about that. Actually, dishwashers can be a better efficient use of water than washing dishes. I forgot what it is, but even if it's just a couple of dishes, they say, "Oh, don't waste it running the dishwasher." It's actually probably not true considering how long you leave the water on to wash dishes. But how come it doesn't seem to translate from the significance of the sources and the direction that we are hoping for doesn't seem to translate necessarily into Orthodox action proportionally or as much as we would expect. So this writer mentions, why have the Orthodox flocked to join the fight against climate change? Two reasons stand out. First of all, Orthodox Jews tend towards social conservatism, and climate change is usually championed by liberals. In addition to the intrinsic suspicion this may evoke in the Orthodox community, there's further concern that supporting environmentalists will be seen as a general support for the liberal agenda, right? This intersectionality problem is exacerbated by the association made environmental groups with ultra-liberal Israel activism. Right? Intersectionality is this phenomenon that is causing a lot of trouble within the liberal and progressive world in terms of the ability of pro-Israel Zionists to exist in that world because everything is connected. Well, it works the other way as well, that if Orthodox Jews would support various environmental initiatives, that may mean that they may be pegged as supporting the whole agenda of those organizations, and that's something that the Orthodox community is not willing to do. The second reason is that religious value statements like those above express values generally without making specific demands on the individual or community. Right? Environmentalism, save the earth, right? Have a smaller carbon footprint, use less water. These statements struggle to motivate people to seriously engage with issues like climate change, which calls for significant economic and personal sacrifice. Compare this to the authoritative and compelling nature of Halakhah, Jewish law. Because of its specificity and binding obligation, Halakhah is unique in the Jewish canon, demanding action. And the Orthodox regularly prioritize Halakhah over economic and creature comforts. We pride ourselves living under authority and are willing to make life changes based on halachic demands. Right? But there has yet to be a halachic demand to use less plastic. Whether it's very difficult just to marshal the sources, whether it's just to marshal the sources, to find, we're trying to create the psak halakhah. What is that halachic decision that we can then show our congregants? You have to do it this way. Coupled with, very famously, the Talmud talks about that you don't make a rule on the congregation she'ein hatzibur yecholin lamod ba, that they're not going to follow. Right? Judaism, halakha is often seen as top down, but there are times when the direction of the top down is governed by the grassroots and the bottom up. So to make rules that you can't use X, first off, you have to be able to defend that based on the sources, and you have to recognize it unless you're able to make it as explicit as, thou shalt not take God's name in vain, where you can identify a couple of actions where that have to be followed. If you're not going to have a very specific textually supported behavior, then you're not going to be able to cross that Rubicon of people actually following it, and therefore you're not necessarily going to want to introduce it in the first place. So this is kind of a vicious cycle. We don't have the textual tradition that necessarily gives us the action items, and if we want to make those action items, we're not sure people are going to follow them. So generally, you need to have you need a coalition of the willing to introduce this. Now I see Phyllis mentions that in Scotland that they had China, real silverware too.
Yes, yes.
All right.
Definitely.
How many people? Is it like 500 people in Shul?
Not quite.
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
50.
Look, you can make a case that for a smaller crowd it's doable, and like you mentioned, it depends. When, something tells me Scotland ain't what it used to be, and even then it really wasn't what it used to be. So it's but it would we basically continue this in the Orthodox community, at least. And this is what Reznikov is noting. We end up with, yes, we believe in the concept and we really view it as a positive value and even as a mitzvah, but how to fulfill that mitzvah through which actions communally, it will be very hard for the rabbis to legislate in a way that will be effective unless the community comes together and has kind of a social contract in order to follow in this way. So that's the environmental approach, environmental piece of this recent decision with regards to working to eliminate the tax on these single-use items, even though on some level it's left to people's behavior and choices. Do you wash your plastic? Do you use it twice? Do you use less? It's left to the community to try and do the best that they can, following Judaism's directives to be as careful with the environment as possible. Questions, comments, reactions to the environmental piece of the puzzle? All right. So now let's look at the sugary drinks and the health piece of the puzzle, because when looking at this issue, you didn't really see much reaction within the Orthodox community, other than in these broad pronouncements that we should be more environmentally conscious. But when it came to the sugary drinks, you see source number 6, Rav Mutzafi calls Smotrich a donkey for lowering taxes on sugary drinks. Right, so here, following a positive reaction among the Haredi public following the decision to lower the tax on sweet drinks in Israel, Rav Ben Zion Mutzafi, Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva B'nai Zion, attacked the decision of Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. What fools these are, said Rav Ben Zion. This donkey is going to lower the tax on sugary drinks? Fool. We are the #1 country in amputations. Where does this come from? From the disease of diabetes. We have over 1 million diabetics, over 10% of the population, and that's the known ones. The Rosh Yeshiva went on, there are those who have silent diabetes who have not discovered it. Diabetes comes when you eat sugar and drink sweets. It also makes you fat and brings terrible diseases. Diabetes is a terrible plague. Okay, so he's I don't think he's very shy about what he feels on this subject. And he uses pretty strong language, insulting language towards Rav Smotrich. Minister Smotrich, but he's coming at this issue not necessarily on the save the environment side, but health. How can you do this? Why are you making it easier for people to get the sugary drinks? Right? We have an ironclad responsibility in Judaism to nishmartem ma'od lenafshotechem, to protect health. Right? Pikuach nefesh is a value. Why should anything be done in a way that makes it easier for people to make bad choices that will harm their health? So, you may be thinking, well, there are other bad choices that people make. Well, Rav Mutzafi is against some of those other possible bad choices. Source number 7. Rav Mutzafi wrote, anyone who goes on intercity roads and even local roads sees the total lawlessness with electric bicycles and electric scooters, which are absolute tools of murder. I bless the hand which will sign a prohibition against riding electric scooters and bikes on the roads. I bless the parents who prevent their children from riding on them. They lead to Gehenna, and the rider is classified as suicidal. I doubt whether he has a portion in the world to come. Pretty harsh. Ride an electric scooter on the road, you're going to Gehenna. No share in the world to come. Why? They're dangerous. Are they any more dangerous than? Are they any more dangerous than than other bad choices? What about people who go skiing? Is that I have heard rabbis discuss skiing as an inappropriate Jewish activity because of the danger involved and the nature of the falls, and maybe it's not life endangering, but it's limb endangering. That's why I don't ski. I'm a very good skier. I'm a terrible stopper. So I don't. If you can't stop, you really shouldn't ski. But here you have it. You have a religious approach to this idea that yes, you should make unhealthy behaviors. You should forbid them, or you should do something that will minimize them, especially when it's a major stumbling block in the community as a whole. So therefore, this rolling back of the sugary drink tax is a terrible thing because you're endangering people. In general, if anyone looks up some of the other statements Rav Mutzafi has made on these types of behaviors, it's in line with how he approaches it. And so here we come to sort of the second piece in terms of these dangerous behaviors. How far to go in forbidding them, and how do we look at it? Is it forbidden to have a can of soda? No, because everything in moderation. But what if there are ways to, if there is a health threat and there are ways to combat that, and you skip those ways to combat it, or you ignore them, or make it easier for people to have access, then that is a religious problem. That's a halachic problem, according to Rav Mutzafi. It's a religious philosophical problem. You're going to Gehenna if you take your life in your hands, or it makes things dangerous. And this leads to some of the other types of dangerous behaviors out there. And one that's a natural way to shift has to do with smoking, and the rabbinic and religious response to smoking over the generations. Look, smoking has been around for a long time. Jews have been smoking, people have been smoking for a long time. And how does that get understood in terms of, what's the religious response? Is it dangerous? Is it forbidden? Is it not a good choice? And people can make their own choices. Well, what about the fact that we do have ways, especially as Jews who follow Halakhah? If rabbis would say it's forbidden, right? Plenty of people don't eat pig because it's forbidden. Maybe people won't smoke because it's forbidden, right? And sometimes it's a fascinating subject. I mention it all the time, how certain types of behavior, which are there to protect us, people automatically engage in. I can think about seatbelts, right? In our lifetime, it's gone from people not wearing seatbelts in the front seat to wearing seatbelts in the back seat, and it's kind of it's somehow managed to pass muster that this is kind of universal behavior for protection. So why don't we look at cigarettes as a loaded gun, and we'll look at it the same way? Is it because of human desire? Is it there's definitely a financial angle involved in it in terms of the business piece side of things, and the tobacco companies and the like, right? But they often say with regards whenever there's Rahman al-Islam, unfortunately, these shootings that take place all the time, right? Guns don't kill people, people kill people, right? But here, cigarettes kill people. So the object, the item should be removed. And so there has been, for the most part, as the science and the understanding of the specific understanding of the dangers of smoking have emerged, there's been a kind of a tightening of the noose, or of more stricter responses to the issue of smoking from a halakhic angle. It goes from in the 1960s, when the Surgeon General's warnings first started coming out. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein started addressing the subject, and recognize that it's dangerous and we have to avoid dangerous situations. And however, sometimes it's difficult for people to quit. And there's a category in Jewish law called anus, when you're kind of forced into doing something. So maybe, so the idea of a full-throated prohibition didn't necessarily emerge in those times. People used to do it before. We have different categories. Look, we let people ski, even though it can be dangerous. So there's a certain acceptable risk which Halakhah recognizes, and it impacts the final decision on the subject. But certainly, as you move into through the 80s and 90s and the 21st century, there's been much more of a harsh response, a stricter, more stringent approach to it. And Rabbi Chaim Jachter, he's a rabbi in New Jersey, a teacher at Torah Academy, Bergen County. And it has a whole series. Or he writes a Halakhah article for the school's Torah journal, and he wrote about a groundbreaking tshuva. This is source number 8, and he quotes Tchumim volume 33, which is another Torah journal. Includes a groundbreaking tshuva from Rav Eliyahu Abergel, who serves with distinction as an Av Beis Din in the District State Rabbinic Court of Yerushalayim. Rav Abergel urges Rabbanim to refrain from using one who smokes to serve as a witness at halachic events such as a wedding ceremony. While Abergel does not validate a smoker b'diavad, he seems to be the first mainstream authority to publish a tshuva calling on Rabbanim to initially refrain from using such a smoker as a witness. Right, so recognizing that you could say things are forbidden, but people will do it anyway. Here, this response is that to categorize someone who smokes as a sinner. And so a sinner is not a blatant sinner, is not allowed to be used as a religious witness at things like a wedding. Right? Weddings require the witnesses to not be related to anybody. That's the idea of karov in the Talmud. But they also cannot be pasul. Who's considered someone pasul? There are various categories of sinful behavior, but someone who is a sinner, is a known sinner, can't be a witness. So Rav Abergel wants to say someone who smokes is a sinner, and they cannot serve as a witness under a chuppah. Now he says if they chose him as the witness, and either they didn't know he smoked or they didn't know they shouldn't use him, he says, b'diavad, after the fact, we're not going to invalidate the wedding. Right? It could be interesting. The way halacha works is that, generally speaking, if a man and woman live together and raise a family, they're considered married. But sometimes, they don't necessarily have a halachic marriage ceremony. And if they don't have a halachic marriage ceremony, they're not necessarily halachically married, which means they don't need a religious divorce to end that marriage. And sometimes what would happen is if they didn't have a halachic marriage, and they didn't have a halachic religious divorce ceremony, they get remarried, and the woman has children from the second man, then that can create problems of the children. That's a classic case in Jewish law of the mamzer, right? The mamzer, which is sometimes translated incorrectly as a child born out of wedlock. A mamzer is when a woman has a child from a man when she's halachically married to another man. And so very, very often these days when the situation arises, usually the first husband is, the relationship with the first husband is not viewed as a halachic relationship for all sorts of different reasons. At times it's the fact that there weren't kosher witnesses. So I wonder how that would play out if this really took us to to take it to the extreme. Would anyone even say b'diavad after the fact that this marriage is not recognized? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But Rabbi Jachter calls this groundbreaking, that we're calling, not only are we saying smoking is bad for you, now we're saying smoking is dangerous, now we're saying smoking is a forbidden type of activity like other unhealthy activities because it's dangerous. We're categorizing the smoker as a sinner. And that kind of that kind of creates teeth into this calling it forbidden. Something can be forbidden and people choose to do it anyway. But here we're saying if you do it, you're a sinner. In an article that came out when Rabbi Abergel made his pronouncement, it was noted, Rabbi source number 9, Rabbi Dr. Mordechai Halperin, the head of the Schlesinger Institute for the Study of Medical Science, according to Halakhah, has stated that he heard directly from Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that only in a situation where smokers do not know they're violating the prohibition against murder do they indeed not become disqualified from testimony. So he's saying that Rabbi Auerbach also had a similar idea, right? Assuming that the smoker was told that you are sinning, that you are engaged in this terrible behavior, right? Because you're smoking, and if you're smoking, you're harming yourself, and secondhand smoke, you're killing others. If the person was so warned, then that person would be disqualified from being a witness. So Rabbi Halpert is saying that Rav Alberjal's decision isn't necessarily so groundbreaking. It wasn't just in 2013. It was already some 30 years prior that Rabbi Auerbach, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach had felt something similar, that not only is smoking a prohibited activity, but the smoker is a sinner. But the smoker, to be a sinner, has to you have to know that he knew the consequences of the behavior would categorize him as a sinner. So taxing sugary drinks could be great because it's trying to remove a danger. And it's not just sometimes on these political issues that it comes up. It's in everyday life we can encounter dangerous situations that we should be dissuading by all means necessary people from engaging in types of behavior that can be dangerous to themselves or others. Rabbi Shlomo Aviner takes it one step further, calling out the synagogue candy man. Source number 10, Rav Aviner, writing an article for the Srugim newsletter. Right? What does he say? He says, do not distribute candy to children because sugar is poison. It is indeed a sweet poison, but it is poison. The white drug, the sweet falsehood, the dark side. It causes cancer, obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart and vascular diseases, and tooth decay. Ask the World Health Organization, right? So it's very rare for religious Zionist, right-wing settler rabbis to be invoking the UN. There are more and more sick people in the world due to the consumption of sugar. In recent year, the number of type 2 diabetes has risen threefold. In Israel, there are 500,000 children suffering from obesity. We are second in the world in this, and it gets worse every year. We know that children do many stupid things. It's our duty to gird ourselves with patience toward them, but for us to encourage them in detrimental things, chas v'chalila. I hear bah humbug, ringing in my ears. The idea, is there a flip side? Sugar-free candy. You want to make them feel more comfortable in shul. We can go on and on, but we see if we're talking about looking at the rabbinic, the halachic response to some of the types of behaviors that are dangerous, we need to the approach that was taken by the Israeli government in 2021, which was taxes on plasticware and sugary drinks. It didn't have to necessarily be an assault on one community. It does fit in an environmental consciousness that Judaism has, although we see that can be complicated to actually apply in a proactive way day-to-day living. And it also had a very important health message. It was very much in keeping with the need to do what we can to keep people healthy. And if this is going to dissuade them from those sugary drinks and try and combat a health issue, then Jewish law would smile upon such an effort. The similar way that the Jewish law would smile on an effort to encourage people to stay safe on electric scooters or ski slopes, or avoid smoking, or encouraging too much use of candy. And it kind of, it's interesting that the part of the 2021 law regulation about in Israel, the focus of the anger was on the tax on the plasticware. Right? You don't have as much pushing back on the sugary drink tax because that one is harder to get behind. There's no wind in those sails or fuel to that fire of opposition on that front, because that would fit very well. The types of behaviors that we see the rabbis calling out. The Rav Mutzafi in particular, who called out the rolling back of the sugary drink tax. It's because when it comes to health, it still is prioritized overall. So the cabinet rolled back these taxes. The government has to. I would imagine there will be many more issues there'll be some back and forth as to whether they're being done at the expense of or to the benefit of one community or the other. But the way this issue played out, it's harder from the halachic perspective to prescribe certain behaviors on the environmental front. Much easier, although still difficult, to call out and require certain types of behaviors on the health front, even though that sometimes takes time and will never be spoken in one voice. At the end of the day, the side that is about protecting ourselves, that kind of has a certain specificity, and there's an object there, as opposed to the more vague yet aspirational value of protecting the environment. Both important, both religious values, both mitzvos. But when the mitzvahs have more specific, has more specificity, they're easier to endorse and advocate for, and get the community to accept, and things that are more broad and vague. And hopefully people will protect the earth, protect themselves, and Shalom al Yisrael.
Fine.